Have you had trouble finding the right setting or system for the game that you would just love to play? Well, we're going to talk about a few of the ones that I would love to play in and some potential options and some inspirations for those. Let's explore these together in The Sacred Art of Gaming. Welcome back to The Sacred Art of Gaming, where we like to build worlds, tell stories, and play games. Sometimes in that order, sometimes not. I am Sacred, and today we are talking about a couple worlds that I'm finding that my games are just kind of like slowly molding over time, and then also just some obsessions that I've had with some media that I really enjoy, and I want more of it. And I want to play in it. I want to play in that playground. Some of it does kind of exist to some degree, and some of it it either exists too much, but not in the way that I want it to, or kind of like not really at all. Let's go. This first one that I'm going to talk about, without having like a clear way, which I mean, I don't think I really have a clear way to talk about any of these, but we'll just call it hyper fantasy, hyper techno fantasy. Maybe that's good. And the idea behind this is that it is very high fantasy, but also very high technology. And it's kind of the world is hitting its absolute peak. And this is kind of like leading up to an apocalypse situation, but things are so good. Things are like too good. Why are they too good? All good questions. So first let's talk about like some potential inspirations for this, just kind of like how I'm envisioning it anyways, that are not necessarily like, well, we'll start with non-tabletop and then we'll kind of double back. So pretty much, well, I don't know if I can say anything by Brandon Sanderson, but definitely like aspects of Brandon Sanderson novels, we'll say. Stormlight Archives and Mistborn being some of my favorites, and that doesn't necessarily fit based on the description that I made, but there are definitely aspects of it, like the shard bearers and just the insane amount of power that they seem to have. The novel or series known as Codex Alera. And there's some overlap between these two with the Spren, and then also the, I don't know if I'd say they're like Pokemon, but they're kind of like Pokemon and Codex Alera, how they all have their own little like spirit creature type thing. And we'll throw Pokemon in there too. That's kind of what I'm picturing, where you just have these like mythical or ethereal beings that is just kind of like a part of your day-to-day life. I always think back to this, I think it was Pokemon, was it the Detective Pikachu maybe? Where there's just like a Charmander just like at the grill, like helping the guy grill stuff up. And I love that idea. Avatar actually Avatar The Last Airbender might also kind of play into that a little bit too, with their weird creatures that they have. Moving on, a game that did not do well, but I actually enjoy it. And a lot of people dinged it because of the story, but I don't know if I'd say I love the story, but I love the setting. The setting was cool. And that is Immortals of Aveum. That is kind of probably closer to what I'm picturing to some degree. You know what actually is also a good one is friggin' League of Legends. Oh, what was that show? I'm drawing a blank. But the League of Legends show that was on Netflix. Why can't I remember it? It was so good. It was one of the best things I've ever seen. That's a little different, but there are some aspects to it where you kind of have like the build up to an apocalypse type situation. And I just love that idea where there's just going to be people that are just doing so well and are so powerful through these means of technology and magic, the fusion of both, but they're going to push it too far, inevitably. Inevitably, of course. and there's going to be people that are not doing well. I don't know if I would want to, I guess it depends, but that would definitely be an aspect to it for sure. And in my specific example, I don't know if I want to give away in case this comes up in something later. But yeah, there's a reason why things are so good. And of course there's going to be like a dark twist to it. Some potential RPG systems that I think could handle this or aspects of this. I mean, of course you can say D&D 5e because there's like a million different ways to twist D&D 5e that exists, that are out there. One of those ways is actually based on another system that I kind of have in my next one, but it could work for this sort of, which is like the Numenera version of 5e. It's called something else, like Arcana of the Ancients, I believe it's called. Got off a Bundle of Holding at some point, but that is an option. I believe Gloomhaven came out with a TTRPG. There are aspects of that could go into it. 13th Age, Pathfinder. So a lot of these are like kind of obvious ones, but a couple deep cuts would be Eberron. I mean, I guess that's also D&D, right? But there's also like the Savage Worlds version of it. But Into the Odd and Shintar. Some that maybe you don't think of. Shintar is also kind of Savage Worlds. It may exist outside of that. I think it must. But I'm only aware of the Savage Worlds version. And none of those are exactly, like, all of those have a big, like, massive world toolkit that is too much in some areas and not enough in other areas. So with that said, let me know in the comments down below, is there anything that comes to mind, systems or other like inspirations for that type of world? The pillars of this world being, you know, hyper fantasy, hyper technology, super high level, everything seems good, like too good to be true, and then there's going to be a dark secret to that, a dark twist, of course, for why it is so good. Moving on to the next one. For lack of a better term for this, I'm just going to call this Horizon, because it is so close to, it is heavily inspired, by Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn is just, so good. As well as Forbidden West, I believe it's called. And this chronologically is really just like the next step to things were so good and things inevitably failed. Very similar to Horizon, there was some type of like backup plan. The difference being that this is kind of based on fantasy, so there's going to be some strange races involved, and you know how much time has passed, like the world that exists. You know, picture like the world of, to use D&D 5e, use the world of D&D 5e or Eberron or Galarian, Pathfinder, whatever. Now picture that, but like thousands and thousands of years in the future after like civilization has kind of failed. That's kind of what I'm picturing. So really just like more of a fantasy twist on Horizon, which I think is super neat. And I mean, I'll be honest, Horizon is front and center. It's really, this one's less of a mixture of things and really just a twist on Horizon. And I love that idea. I love that idea of like primitive and advanced at the same time. And how did we get from the last setting we just mentioned to this one? What are all the things that happened in between? How are those different races going to interact? Are they even still there? All excellent questions that I would love to explore through like random oracles and tables. So these things are kind of just like naturally building upon themselves as I'm playing these games. The obvious thing to mention for something like this, for a system that exists, would be Numenera, of course, by the Cypher System. And yeah, that's definitely something I have strongly considered. I actually got even more inspired as I looked at Numenera, and that kind of just opened up a whole nother, you know, twisting of where I started with this setting even more, which is really cool with the actual, like, the strange Numenera devices and the actual setting of Numenera. So as I think about it more, it kind of blends into just, it's getting further from its base, which was Horizon, and becoming its own thing, which is super neat. I love that. Another possibility to consider is something like Rifts. There's definitely some potential there. Not the exact same thing, but I can see some overlap, for sure. Yeah, and in this, you know, I really just picture, like, they're trying to discover their, like, why their ancestors put them in this place the way that they did. Things like AI and technology will be viewed as gods. A lot of those similarities, but just with a heavy fantasy twist. A lot of that primitive, taking, like, technology, very high level technology that's just so out of their scope of understanding, and then making, like, really cool shit out of it instead of taking something that's actually like a complete magical or technical item, taking just a small piece out of it, and it's like, oh wow, it's a fire sword, but it's really just like a blade of, like, something that's supposed to, like, this massive machine that's supposed to cook something, but they have just the piece that they don't fully understand, and they just make stuff out of it. And I love that idea of, like, salvaging and crafting. I think that would be a really cool part of that system. Moving on. So this one, what would be a good example, like the most obvious example? I don't know, but we'll just say, like, picture, like, Greco-Roman gods and their involvement. Really, like, Percy Jackson is a heavy influence for this. Something like the video game Hades, where you are essentially all playing as demigods, and the actual gods are all, like, making changes to the world very actively and also interacting with you very actively. And just, they're very petty gods, and just a lot of involvement back and forth. Why can't I remember? Was it like Clash of the Titans or something? The very obvious movie for this. The Troy is another one, kind of very light god involvement in that one. But yeah, that's roughly what I'm picturing. Definitely want to lean into the more, like, that time period. That was a Bronze Age, right? With heavily on Greece, maybe a little Roman that kind of goes a little further, and then also, like, Far East, like Egypt and stuff like that, Parthia. I think that would be super neat, just blending those together into one, like, fantasy world, but it just, you are definitely playing the role of something that's similar to, like, a demigod. You're more like a Hercules. You don't necessarily have to be, like, you know, a brute, but that's definitely, like, a part of it, right? And you're going to be doing all these crazy things. Some inspirations for, like, TTRPGs that you could use for something like this that come to mind, kind of, is Aegon, Mythic Odysseys of Theros, and that's a D&D 5e book that uses, like, Magic the Gathering. 13th Age, there's some aspects of that with, like, the factions, if you can call them that. What do they call them? Why can't I remember anything right now? They call them something. Paragon? Is it Paragon system? Those are some things that I definitely intend to steal from. And then, yeah, just taking those ideas. And I really think Mythic Odyssey of Theros would really be, like, a good point to start from and then expand from there. And just really wanting the gods to be constantly involved in doing dumb shit, while you're also, like, interacting with them directly or indirectly, or their disciples or whatever. I really love that idea. I really love the idea of, like, maybe in your party there are multiple members that have allegiances to different gods, and then how that affects the party as a whole. Maybe buffs and debuffs that they have. Love that idea. Super cool. All right. Now, the one that I have found the most difficult to emulate in a tabletop game. Please help me. Help me with all of these. If you have ideas for settings, inspirations, systems, let me know in the comments. But this one I've been finding tough. And for lack of a better term, we're just going to call this Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat adjacent. That would be like where it's starting and then expanding from there. Because if you think about it, Mortal Kombat is kind of like modern fantasy, if you think about it. There's definitely, it's definitely a lot more fantastical than you may originally think. But having explored like a lot of the games and the different backstories and stuff, there's definitely a lot of fantasy there. But the core concepts that I would love to focus in on is that it must be based in martial arts, for sure. Even like Shang Tsung, right? He's not really like a hand-to-hand fighter necessarily. Like he does, but not really. His focus is more so like doing like sorcerer shit. And that's cool. But even him, he's got his own fighting style that also kind of goes with the whole sorcerer thing. I love that idea. And I want to play a game that does it. I don't know that game necessarily exists. I've seen like things that maybe touch on something like that very briefly, but yeah, I love that idea of everything based in martial arts. It's almost like if Monk was the only playable character in a 5e campaign and you could only play like their subclasses. But also changing the setting, of course. I think it would be good if it stayed modern. I like that idea of like the world kind of being hidden, but I also love the idea of the show called Into the Badlands. That is also super cool. You know, there are people that like use weapons and stuff, but they're kind of like cowards, and it's a post-apocalyptic world. But like the people that actually are powerful, they tend to have like a strong martial arts background. Everything is kind of settled in that way. And if I remember correctly, Into the Badlands, the using ranged weapons was also like kind of cowardly, which I don't know. We'll see how that would go. But yeah, I love that idea. I do love like magic being a part of that too, but I want it to be based in martial arts. So some obvious pivots from that is like Avatar, right? Avatar: The Last Airbender with bending. So that is a possibility. There is the Avatar role-playing game, which I don't technically own. I don't own it at all, not even non-technically. But I have the quick start, and it just hasn't pulled me in yet. I don't know. We'll see. Legend of Ghost Mountain, and then also the martial arts companion whenever that comes out for Savage Worlds. Those two things maybe. So I guess Legend of Ghost Mountain, which I also don't have. The only thing that I actually do have, and I need to look into it more, is Feng Shui 2? Feng Shui 2, maybe? I think that's what it's called. I'll be honest, looking at the system, it didn't pull me in and make me love it the way I wanted it to. But that is a possibility. Do you have any other martial arts base settings and systems that come to mind where you think of like almost any fighting game and the backstory that's around that? Soul Calibur, Tekken, Street Fighter. Mortal Kombat I think is really where I think that is kind of the most interesting, just because it just feels more expansive, where you could build out with it more. It just feels like the martial arts is there, but it doesn't have to be as like karate, Muay Thai, wrestling. It can really expand out into like, you know, being a cyborg or being a sorcerer, being undead, being a lizard. Like, I think those are all really cool. Ooh, that reminds me. Killer Instinct, another really cool one. All right, so those are the settings that I would just love to be able to play in. I'm kind of in the process of building as I'm playing games. And I don't know, if by the time I have anything even remotely coherent, I would like to think something has already been discovered, but I don't know, we'll see. It is a long and arduous process for sure. With that said, if you have enjoyed the ramblings of a madman regarding these settings, don't forget to like, and if you want to come on this journey as a DICE disciple with the sacred art of gaming, maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss anything and you get all the solo playthroughs and my nonsense talks and ideas. So, this has been Sacred with the Sacred Art of Gaming. Until next time, signing out. Beat it, nerds!